on Monday? And what do you need to see in that bipartisan package for it to get your vote?
Yeah, no, great points, because I am confident, Garrett, largely because I trust the people that are negotiating, both the Republicans and the Democrats. There's a sincere effort. The framework from the beginning was a pretty good start, but as you know, it had some pretty wonky pay-for, some things that the Democrats objected to, some things Republicans objected to. That path has been cleared, which was major. I think, we know that a compromise package is going to have some things we like and some things we don't like. I don't think anybody expects anything differently. I think people largely want an infrastructure package, so we're doing the right work. And I have confidence in them, and I do have confidence that we can get to 60. I want to be one of those 60. I've talked to other Republicans who want to be a yes if they can get there. What I'd like to see is I want to see a preservation, of course, of the traditional formula. This is sort of inside, highway bill stuff, but the formula where it's a 90% split, 90-10% split between states getting 90% and grants being the other 10%, the 80-20 split between traditional infrastructure and transit. But everything I've seen is that there's a very strong emphasis on traditional infrastructure, and those things that aren't so traditional are still hard infrastructure, whether it's transmission lines or some resiliency.
Right.
So I think it's a good faith effort, and I think a lot of people want to get to yes.
I've heard from a lot of Republicans who are still linking this bill with the reconciliation package that Democrats are working on separately. Are you watching that $3.5 trillion out of the corner of your eye? Does that potentially play into how you would vote on this?
So, Garrett, I, from the very beginning, have always believed that the two are very separate, and they ought to be judged separately. The merits of each can be judged separately. What Democrats do with the $3.5 trillion in trying to pass it through their straight partisan means is really irrelevant. If the $1.2 trillion, or if it turns out to be $800 billion or 1.1, whatever it turns out to be, if it meets the standards that I want, including some permitting reforms, I want to be for that. What Democrats do, I can't control, but I can control this side. I think it has the additional value, Garrett, just the process itself has the value of the American people seeing people in Congress working together across party lines to accomplish something good for the country. And I think we badly need something like that. And this provides that opportunity.
I think the President of the United States would agree with you there. I want to ask you a little bit about the January 6th committee stuff as a former House guy here. We are here because Republicans in the Senate, yourself included, voted against the bipartisan independent commission that could have kind of codified its seat at the table for Republicans and could have taken this outside of Congress. I wonder now, with what you're seeing in the House, do you regret opposing the commission given the way this has now all unfolded?
I don't regret it, because I think you would have taken what would be a bipartisan commission and still been under control of Democrats and would have been turned into a very partisan deal, which, by the way, is exactly what we're seeing played out in the House. The Speaker appoints this commission. She pushes this through. After some reluctance, obviously, the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, appoints some Republicans, and right away the Speaker shows her bias by saying, well, no, we can't have pro-Trump Republicans, only, skeptical Trump Republicans. And it just exposed the partisan nature of it. So I think would a commission not have prevented that?
I mean, is there any way to investigate January 6th that wouldn't, in your view, somehow be partisan then?
Well, I think that the committee process is exactly the way to do that. That's why we're here. That's why we're elected. That's why in a 50-50 Senate, that's why the work of the two committees that have jurisdiction did such good work and came out with some findings that will be helpful going forward. But wanting to expand that and review history in the context of the next election or whatever the case might be, I don't think you need an extra commission, an extra layer of bureaucracy to do that, and that can be politicized, and we're seeing exactly that play out in the House. And I think you'd have seen exactly the same thing by a, quote, bipartisan commission.
I want to review history with you just for a little bit here. The Washington Post reporters Carol Lenning and Philip Rucker posted some audio from their recent interview, I believe actually was in March, with the former president, who had kind words to say about some of the individuals who stormed the Capitol that day. Listen to this for me, if you would.
Sure.
In all fairness, the Capitol Police were ushering people in. The Capitol Police were very friendly. They were hugging and kissing. You don't see that. But there's plenty of tape on that too, you know, because the Capitol Police that's the way it is. But personally what I wanted is what they wanted. They showed up just to show support.
Senator, you were in the Capitol on the 6th. You said on the 7th that anyone who tries to rationalize or explain away January 6th does a great disservice and that you won't excuse it. Do you think that's what the former president is doing in this interview?
Well, I didn't hear the whole thing. This is the first time I've heard that piece, and I noticed at the very end he said to show support. And I think he's been pretty consistent about that, Garrett, that, you know, the people showing up to show support is one thing, but what I can't rationalize is people who showed up to show support and that those numbers that came to the Capitol clearly violating law, going over barriers, breaking through doors, walking through broken glass to get there. And granted, some of them probably didn't intend to do something as egregious as that, and they got caught up in the moment. But they were easily persuaded. I don't rationalize it. I don't rationalize anti-cop behavior by anybody. I think that if you rationalize it by one side, you lose the moral authority on the other side. So, no, I don't share that view at all. I think that everybody that walked through and walked in that night, regardless of their intent, violated law at some level, and I'm glad to see some prosecutions taking place. And it may be overly zealous for some people, but I'd like to see an equal treatment of rioters and lawbreakers that represent a different political view, however, throughout this country.
Well, I don't know that there were a lot of rioters in the Capitol representing a different political view on that day. I know you're referring to folks like Antifa and protesters in other cities, but I think you get into dangerous territory when you start to compare those two things in this context. Senator, I want to ask you a question on a different topic. We've been paying a lot of attention to COVID this week. We've seen surges around the country because of the Delta variant. You're one of a handful of senators who've decided not to say one way or the other whether or not you've gotten the vaccine. But I wonder what you think your responsibility is to your constituents, or how you discuss this with your constituents back home. You know, imagine a lot of folks in North Dakota would probably trust Kevin Kramer more than they trust Anthony Fauci, would probably trust you if you told them even to go talk to their doctors about it. How do you navigate that in North Dakota, and what do you think your responsibility is to those folks?
So I think one of the greatest things, well, the greatest thing about the American experiment is that we're a self-governed democracy. We're not a democracy like all of the others. North Dakotans are very savvy people. There's no shortage of information that they can access to make their decisions, whether it's Anthony Fauci, doctors, MSNBC or another station, or the internet. People are very well informed. They don't need to be lectured to. They certainly don't need to be bullied. They respond more negatively than positively to that. And frankly, I prefer to listen to my constituents than lecture them and inform them. I inform them about what's going on in Congress. I'm not a great informer of what's going on in their personal health care. And I also think, Garrett, and I think you know this about me, I want to honor the people who are legitimately skeptical. Now, I don't share that view. I happen to think that getting vaccinated is a net gain. I think there's less risk in getting vaccinated than not getting vaccinated. I've been very clear about that. But people make these decisions themselves, for themselves and for their families, with legitimate questions about the vaccines that have only been around a short time.
What would qualify as a legitimate question about the vaccine? I'm genuinely curious.
Sure. For example, we have a vaccine that because of Operation Warp Speed, which I supported, and which without Donald Trump would not have happened. I don't know another president in my lifetime that would have made Operation Warp Speed happen at such warp speed. That said, it hasn't been very long. It hasn't been through the type of rigorous reviews that other vaccines have had, and we are just now seeing some outcomes from that vaccine. So people being hesitant or wanting to wait to see how it plays out is perfectly logical to me, but North Dakotans are also, logical in other ways. They know how to take care of themselves, how to protect themselves and their children. So I want to honor that personal privacy, by the way, which is also critical. We can't pray for people's healing in church anymore because it would out their health situations. So I don't know why we should be outing everybody's personal decisions on vaccinations.
I'm not sure who's telling you
myself.
you can't pray for people's health in church, Senator Kramer. You're certainly welcome to pray for mine. I'll pray for yours. Thank you for coming on. And I'm going to ask one of our doctors on the panel later today about those questions about the vaccine. For folks who might be curious about that portion of the hesitancy question, we'll come back to that later. So thank you for raising